Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully, you are getting acquainted of the first week of school. Hopefully, everything is going well for you. Um, this video, we're going to check in with each other about the readings. We're going to have a short lecture on strike, on the readings itself, and then discuss a little about the first module forum, talking about what is the importance of Asian American Studies, and then review um, this week a little. Um, so, this week on the importance of Asian American Studies, we had two readings on strike, San Francisco State College strike, the role of Asian American Studies, and Who Am I? Creating Asian American Identity and Culture. And they had one film on strike, Ethnic Studies. Um, so, the first article on strike, we learned that on November 6, 1968, it is the longest student strike in American history. And the San Francisco State College Third World Liberation Front was a group of students who organized this strike. And their demands were around education, an education that was relevant and accessible to their communities. And what I mean by that is during that period of time, a lot of the history, a lot of the uh, classes didn't necessarily speak to people of color or didn't necessarily represent their experiences here in the United States. And oftentimes, um, many ethnic groups, like Asian Americans, were not able to have access to to college itself. So um, these group of students were able to fight for these more courses that represented themselves, that looked like them, and also fought for um, more Asian Americans in um, the schools themselves. And this was also the birth of the first school of ethnic studies in the nation. So that's why we should reflect upon this period of time. Um, it's very important. It's really one of those pivotal moments in which where Asian Americans were able to be involved, express their concerns, and really um, fight for their education. So next, so what were the impacts of the student strike? So this period of time marked a shedding of silence and affirmation of identity for Asian Americans. Um, in history, their stories and experiences were silent. They weren't necessarily discussed, and oftentimes they were left um, outside of the mainstream history, mainstream culture, society. And this is the first time where they're able to affirm or really um, acknowledge that Asians exist here in the United States and that they belong here in the United States as they contributed to many uh, political, economic, and social things in the American fabric that we know today. And from this period of time, they were surrounded by the civil rights movement, the anti-war, women's rights movement, and student and oppressed nationalities. Um, so many issues were coming up during the late 60s and 70s, and their approach in terms of change was taking any means necessary in order for them to create a better society here in America, for their not for themselves but also for their families. Um, uh, Unfortunately, this didn't necessarily produce those major changes in the economic and political structure at that current moment, but we could see it did affect the popular ideology and social relations of that time. And today we could feel the effects of all those changes as we don't necessarily, we see a lot more representation in different avenues here in the United States, politically, economically, and socially. And next, you were also assigned a film, a documentary on the strike itself. And I wanted just to share a couple guiding questions if you haven't seen it already, or reflection at this moment if you have. Um, how is the strike portrayed in this film? And how have the strikes or protests been taught to you? And when are strikes or protests appropriate for social change? So these are very important questions in um, reflecting upon how we understand these types of actions, as it is very important to see the contributions of Asian Americans in social change by expressing their voices and um, really gathering together with a united voice to create that change. And in the video, you'll see the reality of strikes, the student strike itself, and the brutality that was put on them by state police. And oftentimes we hear or see on the news and media negative portrayals of strikes. And how has that impacted or shaped your understanding of them? And we could see that um, is there an appropriate way to address injustice or people's needs um, when uh, the society must confront those inequities that exist? So, some guiding questions in that. And then this week you are assigned a discussion forum. The prompt is, what is the importance of Asian American studies? And keep this in mind that each forum discussion is due every Wednesday at 11 p.m. And there's particular things that I'm looking for, at least 275 to 500 words. Um, and you're going to look at the three main concepts of the week and kind of discuss how you see them and your understanding of it in the readings. And just a reminder, today or this week's concepts are self-determination, social justice, and political consciousness. So how is this being applied within the readings and also the film? And finally, how does this influence your understanding, shape, define um, the experiences of Asian Americans here in the United States, and also try to connect it to your own lives, either through your family stories, how you see it today, um, as you walk around, how are Asian Americans represented, and how are you uh, affected by that? So that's the forum discussion, and part of that is also the peer review. So on Sundays, the peer reviews are due at 11 p.m. So you'll have to reply to at least one student's post. And you don't have to do it every week, but throughout the semester, you should have at least 7 of them um, uh, written down or posted. And in that, I'm expecting 2 to 3 sentences discussing what you thought about your peers' posts, how you agree or maybe disagree with what they're trying to say, and pick up particular points in their post that you want to talk about and explain. And finally, review. So, um, this week there are 2 readings, the On Strike article and the Who Am I article. And in the films, um, discussing the student strike also. And 2 assignments that you should be turning in will be the first Module 1 forum discussion, and then the narrative identity assignment is due next week on Monday. So if you have any questions about this week, please email me or send a message to me through the Canvas inbox, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible within a day or two, hopefully in response. So hopefully this week wasn't too bad for you. I got acquainted with a lot of what this class is going to delve into, and I'm excited to meet each of one of you. And hopefully you enjoy the rest of your week. Let's see you all soon.